On a warm night in Dubai, beneath the sweeping lights of the Meydan Racecourse, the world's fastest horses were doing what they have always done. They ran. Hooves striking the dirt with breathtaking power, while the grandstand shimmered with lights and cameras. To the crowd, it looked like another glamorous night at one of the richest racetracks on earth. Horses had traveled from across the world to be there. Elite thoroughbreds shipped thousands of miles to compete during the Dubai Racing Carnival. For the sport, it was another international spectacle. But above the racetrack, something was beginning to change. At first, it was only flashes in the distance, small streaks of light cutting through the night sky above the city. Then came the sound, low, distant booms rolling across the desert. People began to glance upward, unsure what they were seeing. It quickly became clear that those lights were not fireworks. Air defense systems were intercepting missiles above Dubai. A regional conflict had reached the skies over the Gulf, and yet, beneath those flashes of light, the races continued. The horses still entered the track. The starting gates still opened. The crowds still watched as hooves thundered down the straight. For many observers, this detail is difficult to process. Watching the footage later, knowing what was happening in the sky above the racetrack, it is hard not to feel a sense of disbelief. When missiles are being intercepted overhead, when explosions echo across the night, it seems instinctive to imagine everything stopping. The lights dimming, the evening ending, horses being led quietly back to their stalls. And yet, somehow they decided to have this spectacle carry on. It's not really for us to judge the decisions made in that moment, but it is impossible not to feel unsettled by it. Because beneath those lights, beneath that sky, were horses. Horses who had been flown across continents to compete. Horses who had no understanding of the flashes above them or the sounds echoing across the desert. Within hours, the situation would shift from surreal to deeply concerning. Airspace across the region began to close. Flights were canceled. Airports suspended departure as tensions escalated across the Middle East. What had been a carefully planned international racing event suddenly collided with something far larger: geopolitics, conflict, and uncertainty. And as the travel system around them began to shut down, a difficult reality emerged. The horses could not leave. Racehorses do not travel the way humans do. They cannot simply book another flight or take a different route home. International horse transport is highly specialized. Horses fly in carefully designed stalls above cargo aircraft, accompanied by experienced grooms who monitor them throughout the journey. Veterinary oversight is often involved as well. Every step is planned to keep the animals calm and safe. That entire system depends on one fragile thing: open skies. When airspace closes, the horses are effectively stranded wherever they are. And in this case, many of them were suddenly stuck in a region where missiles had been intercepted in the sky only hours earlier. Many of the thoroughbreds at Meydan had traveled enormous distances to compete in Dubai. Some had come from Europe, others from racing centers across the world. Their journeys had been planned weeks in advance with carefully timed travel schedules. But now the plan had collapsed. The flights that would eventually take them home simply were not leaving. Before going further, it is important to acknowledge something honestly. Many people who love horses have complicated feelings about the racing industry. The sport can showcase the beauty and athleticism of these animals, but it also raises serious welfare concerns that deserve thoughtful discussion. But moments like this cut through those debates in a different way. Because whatever someone believes about racing itself, one truth remains: horses are living beings placed into systems they do not control. They do not choose the races they run. They do not choose the countries they travel to. And when the world around them becomes unstable, they cannot simply remove themselves from danger. They must wait. Meydan Racecourse itself is one of the most extravagant racing venues ever built. Rising from the desert outside Dubai, its enormous grandstand stretches nearly a mile long and houses hotels, restaurants, and viewing terraces overlooking the track. Every winter, it becomes the center of the Dubai Racing Carnival, drawing elite horses from across the globe. On this particular evening, many of those horses had gathered for one of the carnival's most important race meetings, Super Saturday, traditionally a key event in the lead up to the Dubai World Cup. But as tensions escalated across the Middle East, missiles and drones were launched as part of a growing regional conflict involving Iran. Air defenses across the Gulf began intercepting incoming threats. Trainer Jamie Osborne later described noticing flashes above the skyline during the races. In the same moment that horses were calmly circling in the paddock before competition, missiles were being intercepted high above the city. It is an image that feels almost impossible to reconcile. The glamour of international racing unfolding beneath the shadow of military conflict. Reports suggested debris from intercepted missiles caused fires near Dubai's port and damage to buildings elsewhere in the city. Within the racetrack complex itself, the environment remained calm to help the horses. But the larger picture still felt fragile, because once the sky above a city becomes part of a conflict, uncertainty follows. And for many watching this story unfold, a quiet fear emerged, one that is difficult to say out loud but impossible to ignore. What if the facility itself were struck? Meydan is a massive complex. Stables full of horses sit just beyond the track. Hundreds of animals, along with the people who care for them, housed in one place. In moments of conflict, even unintended damage can happen. Falling debris, misdirected strikes, or expanding hostiles can change circumstances very quickly. The thought of a stable full of horses caught in that kind of situation is deeply unsettling. Because horses cannot run from a conflict like this. They cannot evacuate themselves. They cannot understand what is happening around them. They depend entirely on human decisions and on circumstances far beyond anyone's control. Racehorses rely heavily on routine and stability. Their feeding schedules, exercise programs, veterinary care, and recovery periods are carefully managed by teams who know them intimately. Many of those teams operate from home stables thousands of miles away. While Meydan's facilities are among the best in the world, they are still temporary surroundings for many of these horses. Their real homes, the places where they train, rest, and recover between races, are far away. The longer travel disruptions continue, the more unsettling that reality becomes for people who care deeply about horse welfare. One racing participant later described receiving an emergency alert on his phone during the night advising people to take shelter. Unsure what might happen next, he later said he went to bed with his jeans on and his passport in his pocket. It was a small detail, but it captured the uncertainty of the moment. Yet, in the barns nearby, the horses knew nothing about alerts or airspace restrictions. They simply waited for the next feeding, the next walk, the next familiar routine. And in the stable yards, the people responsible for them did what horse people always do. They continued caring for the animals. Horses were fed, walked, and monitored. Grooms moved quietly through the barns, maintaining the calm environment horses depend on. Reports suggested the horses remained safe and well cared for, but the larger concerns remain. Until the skies reopen, those horses cannot leave. Modern horse racing has become a truly global industry. Horses travel across continents to compete in prestigious races, sometimes flying thousands of miles within a single season. When everything works smoothly, the system functions almost invisibly. But when the system breaks down, when airspace closes and travel stops, the animals at the center of it have no control over what happens next. They must simply wait for the world around them to stabilize. Eventually, the airspace will reopen, flights will resume, the horses will board specialized transport aircraft and begin the long journey back to their home stables. They will return to familiar barns, familiar training tracks, and the people who know them best. But for many observers, the events at Meydan raised a quiet and emotional concern. Because beneath the lights of one of the world's richest racetracks, surrounded by luxury and spectacle, there were still horses, animals, entirely dependent on human decisions for their safety. And for those watching from afar, the hope remains simple that the horses waiting in Dubai remain safe, and that very soon the skies will open again so they can fly home, away from a place that for a brief and unsettling moment felt far too close to a war zone.